Bonjour Monsieur Harbison, et merci beaucoup de m'accorder un peu de votre temps pour une interview sur Bug de Geeks. Pour commencer, est-ce que vous pouvez nous parler de votre parcours et nous raconter un peu ce qui vous a poussé à devenir graphiste de jeux vidéo?
Hello, it's good to speak to you. That first question is quite difficult because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. When I was younger, I wanted to go to Glasgow School of Arts because I wanted to do something in my career to do with art or music. So I had originally decided to go to art college, but for some reason I couldn't get computer games out of my head. And I saw many screens and images in computer magazines of games, and I decided to put a portfolio together and send them off to various computer companies to see if they would consider hiring me to work for them. I must have sent to about 6 or 7 different companies. I got rejected by Elite. I got rejected by Electronic Arts, but Ocean Software decided to give me a chance, and they invited me down for an interview, and before long I was working for them.
Pouvez-vous nous parler de votre première société et de vos premiers travaux? J'imagine que cela devait être très stimulant de travailler pour des licences telles que Batman ou chez HQ par exemple.
Yeah, my first company was Ocean Software, which at the time were probably one of the biggest developers and publishers in Europe. And I'd never had a job before, not even a part-time job as a teenager. So this was the first job I ever had. I was brought up in a small mining town in Scotland where job opportunities were very slim. So the chance to get away to the big city and work on computer games was like a very exciting option for me. And what made it more exciting was that when I eventually left home and went into the Ocean office for my first day on the job, they told me that I would be working on Daley Thompson's Olympic Challenge, which was the second sequel to Daley Thompson's Decathlon, which was quite a big title over here based on a very famous British athlete. And at that time, I had never done animation before. I had only done static screens. So I learned animation while I was working on that project because we had videotape reference. So I was drawing frames of running animation frames direct from video and learning how like animations are constructed. The very first thing that I did was the loading screen to RoboCop on the ZX Spectrum, and I think I was just given that because I wasn't free. I didn't have any free time, but it was like I wasn't particularly busy, so could I spend a few days working on the loading screen, which I did. So that was my first published piece of work. My actual first game was Daley Thompson's Olympic Challenge. And then after that, I worked on an arcade game called WEC Le Mans, the racing game. And when I finished that, pretty much the next week or within the next couple of weeks, I was then working on Chase HQ, which was a very similar experience. It was a racing game. It was drawing trackside objects and cars and manually scaling them to be big and small so that you could see them going into the distance. And then that experience got me on to work on Batman the movie, on the 3D sections with the Batmobile, which again was a natural progression of what I'd worked on Chase HQ. The whole thing about working for Ocean was there was a lot of movie licenses going around, and the fact that I was working on Batman the movie, I wouldn't say we were particularly excited about working on it, but it was an interesting title to work on, and everybody was a movie fan, but I think most of us were quite skeptical about the movies that we were adapting into games, because we were getting early images and storyboards and things from the film companies. You could get an idea of what the final film was going to be like. So we weren't that excited about when the film finally came out, because we'd kind of been living with it for maybe 8 months before the film was actually released. And it was the same with Jurassic Park. I mean, we got folders of information, we got images, we got lots of different concept art of dinosaurs and all that sort of stuff. And by the time the film came out, it wasn't that big a deal for us. I mean, we were walking around Manchester with Jurassic Park t-shirts about a month before the film even came out. So I guess people would look at our t-shirts and think, what does that mean? What is Jurassic Park? Why is there a dinosaur on it? So I guess they would find out soon enough.
En plus de graphiste, vous avez aussi été crédité comme game designer ou créateur de cinématiques sur certains jeux. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous en parler, s'il vous plaît?
In the mid-90s, I started to move into working in 3D and animation, and that is where I got involved with rendering cinematics for games. I was also the main designer of a PlayStation 1 game called Pitball. I had left Ocean and I was then working for a company that had already done a pixel game. The company was called Malibu Interactive, which was part of Malibu Comics, which doesn't exist anymore. They were bought by Marvel. And it was kind of superhero games. And then when Marvel bought Malibu Interactive and we were all made redundant, so we kind of got together as the same group of people but as a different company, and we were offered the chance to make a game for the PlayStation which hadn't been released, I don't think. We were told that this console was coming out and they needed games for it, so could we come up with a 3D game for this new console? I had got the idea of a sports game. It was actually from the opening credits of Miami Vice. The opening credits of Miami Vice has got a sports game. The player has got a massive sort of glove on his hand that they scoop a ball with and then they throw it. So I thought that would be good if it was sort of updated to an electronic glove with a ball made of plasma, and it was 2 teams of 2 against each other. So I started off with the main idea and the main design of the game, and then handed it over to the other designers, and I then moved into creating the cinematics, or some of the cinematics for the game, because every PlayStation game had to have a rendered cinematic in it, because it made it look flashy and expensive and amazing. If you look at them now, most of them are terrible. But that's what we did back then.
Quelles étaient les contraintes de travail sur les différentes machines? Parce que bien sûr, un ZX est totalement différent d'un Amstrad ou même d'un Amiga par exemple.
Well, I started off on the Spectrum, which was very primitive. It was basically one color and a background color, which is why you get a lot of color clash. I didn't do that many games on the Amstrad. I think I just did conversions of the stuff that I was working on the Spectrum, but it was quite liberating to then move over and start creating stuff on the Amiga and the ST, just because we could have 16 colors for each thing that we were working on. We could have 16 colors for one sprite, another 16 colors for another sprite, 16 colors for the background. So we could work with a lot more colors and get better shading and better definition in the graphics that we were creating.
Ensuite, vous avez fait plusieurs jeux sur Super NES. Étaient-elles comparables à un Amiga en termes de graphisme?
Yeah, the SNES was quite similar to the Amiga in respect of the color and the color palettes that we could use. I'm not sure if it was as powerful though. I think it still had problems with having the number of sprites in a line. Things would start to flicker off. But I think the experience of both was quite similar.
Est-ce que vous auriez aimé travailler sur les consoles portables, notamment la Game Boy par exemple?
I wasn't that interested in working on the Game Boy because I was always looking to the next thing. I wanted to get into 3D. I wanted to do bigger, more complicated things. And the Game Boy, it then felt like a step back. But now I think I would have liked to have done something on the Game Boy just because of how popular it was. The only piece of my work that's on the Game Boy is in the Game Boy version of Jurassic Park. There's a map of the island that I modeled in 3D for a promotional video for the movie, and I rotated it round 360 degrees, made the map rotate, and then gave that to the artist who were working on the Game Boy version, and they created a Game Boy version of that map. So that's the only thing that I have got on the Game Boy.
J'ai aussi vu que vous aviez été crédité sur le jeu Ultraverse Prime par rapport à l'écran d'accueil. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous parler de cette expérience sur ce jeu, s'il vous plaît?
I didn't have a lot to do on the Prime game. It was very close to being finished when I joined the company. So if I did anything, it would have been some additional sprites. And after that, I worked on an unreleased game based on another one of the Malibu characters called Firearm. And there was a lot of background graphics that I created on that game, which are now all completely lost. I mean, I have a few images that I managed to rescue, but the game doesn't exist anymore.
Ensuite, vous avez fait quelques travaux sur PC et notamment un jeu qui a attiré mon attention parce que je ne le connaissais pas du tout. Il s'agit de Flash Fist. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous parler de cette expérience sur ce jeu?
Flesh Feast is quite a weird one. I had just been made redundant from Time Warner Interactive when their company just got bought out by somebody else, or they just decided to close the company. I think it was Warner had decided that they didn't want any internal development anymore, so they got rid of us after we had worked on, I think we were doing a PC version of Primal Rage, and then after that they decided to close the studio. So I was out of work, and I was on if you remember IRC, it was a way to chat to people with just different groups and things. And I was in a room with lots of people talking about games and stuff. And then one of the people on the chat asked me if I wanted a job because I'd said I wasn't working. And I said, well, yeah, sure. I mean, I was pretty skeptical that this person was actually real or anything. I got an email from whoever was the head of the company, and the company was real. They were actually working on a game. So I got the train up to Lancaster, and I was introduced to some of the members of the team that was working on this game called Flesh Feast. If you see the game, you'll see that it's not a good game. It's pretty awful. But while we were working on the game, because it was the first time that I had done any work from home, and was emailing my work to the company. This was in like 1996 that I was working remotely for a games company, but had never seen the game actually running. So I was creating like a few animations for that game, and then did some character skins for the 3D characters, which was kind of similar to what we would have done on Quake, which was just a front and a back of a character, and then they just stuck it together on a 3D model. I didn't actually see the game until much later. And it is really, really terrible. I've never played it, and there's not many references to the game online. I think there's a video on YouTube of it. Yeah, it's an awful game.
Ensuite, vous êtes revenu sur DS et par la suite également de nouveau sur console de salon et sur jeux mobiles. Et j'ai l'impression que beaucoup de graphistes sont passés sur le jeu mobile avec l'évolution du marché du jeu vidéo. Est-ce que c'était difficile justement de travailler sur ces plateformes-là, sachant que les environnements étaient très différents d'un téléphone à l'autre?
After I had worked on the Flesh Feast game, and I think I worked on something else, I had to take a few years out of the industry to basically look after my son. So I was 7 years out of the industry. And you'll know that computer games industry moves very, very quickly. And because I had taken time away from there, it was almost impossible for me to catch up, to work on the sort of projects that I would have been working on if I hadn't stopped work. Fortunately, I was given some pixel work on mobile phones. So I was essentially starting my career again from scratch. So I started doing some pixel games for mobile phones, which was pre-iPhone. So it was everything had to be of different sizes to match the different screens of the different companies that brought out different mobile phones. So sometimes there would be maybe over 6 different versions that you would have to make of the same game with a different screen resolution. You might have to make the sprites slightly smaller for one particular phone. It was very difficult, but mobile phone games were just starting to take off. So people were buying them, but it wasn't until the iPhone came along and basically all of these companies and phones just disappeared pretty much overnight.
Et pour un gros jeu comme Sonic SEGA All-Stars Racing, comment cela se passait-il d'être dans une aussi grande équipe?
Well, after I had worked on a load of mobile games, and I had then worked on the company that I was working for had then moved into the Nintendo DS. So I was working on a Top Trumps game, Doctor Who Top Trumps, and a few other 3D things for like a PC game and a browser game. So I was getting back into doing 3D work, and then that company closed down and we were all made redundant again. I was finding it very difficult to get a job in a company because companies were kind of beginning to dry up and weren't in the area where I was in Manchester. So I was finding it hard to get a job. So it was at that point that I decided, instead of applying for positions in companies, I decided to be a contractor on my own. So I built up my portfolio. I worked for an agency that was supplying contractors to bigger companies, and I was lucky enough to be accepted to work at Sumo Digital on Sonic and SEGA All-Stars Racing. They had quite a small core team that were working on it, but they had a lot of contractors. Probably about 2/3 of the team were contractors. The main staff were in one side of this massive open plan office, and the contractors were on the other side. And we were only supposed to be there for like 3 months. And in that time, Sumo Digital had decided they were going to downsize, so a load of their employees got made redundant while I was working there. When I had got to the end of my 3 months, I was asked to stay on as a contractor. I think I stayed on for about 5.5 months when I was supposed to be there for 3. And in the end, they still had all their employees over on one side of this office, and I was sat at a desk by myself. On the other side, all the contractors are gone, and I was the only one left. And so the employees and the contractors didn't really mix that much. In fact, the employees had little groups of little cliques of people that would only speak to each other from different companies. So in the end, I think I was happy to work on the game, but I was kind of glad to get out of there.
Votre dernier jeu est bien Lone Moving Simulator?
Yeah, the last full release I worked on was completely worked on was the lawn mowing simulator game, where I built a lot of environments, 3D environments for the game. I also moved on and worked on the pre-production of Hitman Reloaded VR, which just came out, but I was made redundant from that just as production was beginning. So I'm now working at another company, working on quite a big project.
Sur quoi travaillez-vous en ce moment? Et en prenant du recul par rapport à votre carrière passée, est-ce que vous pouvez nous dire quel a été ou quels ont été vos plus grands défis?
At the moment, I can't really talk about what I'm working on, but it's going to be a very big project next year. I think you'll definitely hear about it. I can't say what I'm doing or what type of work it is, but it has taken pretty much every part of my career so far. I have managed to implement into this game. So it's been fun for me. As the most challenging thing, I think probably the most challenging thing was getting started in 3D, because it's not the easiest thing to understand when you come from a traditional 2D art background. But once you start working in 3D and you've been working on it for a while, it does improve your 2D skills because you start to be able to see in your mind what your drawing or image would seem in 3D and how light would interact with that object. So it's like at art school they give you little courses in sculpting as well as drawing and stuff, so that you can understand form and structure. So working on 3D, even though it was a challenge to start off, it did improve my 2D work.
Je vous remercie beaucoup pour avoir pris le temps de répondre à mes nombreuses questions. Je vous souhaite le meilleur pour la suite. On suivra vos travaux avec beaucoup d'attention. Merci encore beaucoup et à très bientôt.
Well, it was good to talk to you. Thanks for your questions. And I'll speak to you again soon.